Hello and welcome everybody. I cannot believe this is the first time in 3 years that we've been able to come together in person for this event, and I think that's thrilling. So I'm going to take a quick moment. Justin, are we having a microphone issue? No, you guys can hear me? Yeah. I'm loud, so if you can't hear me, there's a problem, right? Before we officially get started, I just want to take a moment to introduce our readers to you all. So I'm going to ask you to hold your applause to the end. There's 20 of us all together. Down on the end, we have Jay, who's a former board member, co-chair of our programming committee, member of the music fan series, and also a member of the operations committee. Next to Jay is Wendy, a former board member. And next to Wendy is Joyce, who's our volunteer booker, member of the programming and the music fan committees. Next is Cassandra Joseph, who is on staff here as an administrative assistant. Jack S. of all trades. She does a little bit of everything for us. Then we have Joel, who's the secretary of our board and the chair of the operations committee. Pam, who is on our board, and she's co-chair of programming and a member of the operations committee. Up top here, Captain America himself, we've got Blake Shapiro, who is a board member. Next is Rose, who is a fabulous box office volunteer. Next we have Jenna, who is on our board. And then Free at Last, who is our board chair and the chair of facilities. Next to Free is Bob. Bob is the producer of our Saturday Creature Feature series, and he is a member of the Facilities Committee. Next to Bob is Anne, who is our previous director and our theater arts director. All the way on the end in the back, we have Jay Blotcher, who's a member of the Music Fan series and helps us with all of the marketing, especially for that series. Mary Lois, a member of the Programming Committee. Mike, chair of the Music Fan series. Fatima, who is our concessions goddess and a member of programming and the gala committee. Amy Pooks, who is the director of Yet, it's the youth ensemble theater, who is running programs here now in this summer. We have a live show on Saturday, and then we have a fall program coming up as well for tweens and teens. And next to Amy is James, who is our brand new front of house manager. James, we are so happy that you are here. And next would be Carl Weldon, who is a lighting and sound expert, deep supporter of the theater and the collective. You're going to hear from her later. This is our neighbor, Tess. She is a musician and a music educator, and she'll be sharing some beautiful music at the end of our program. Before we get started, Rebecca, where are you? Right here. Come on up. Rebecca has something. She brought some stuff, and she wants to share with everybody.
I have voter registration forms. I'm going to put them on the table, and then it's turned off.
Check 1, 2, 1, 1, 1. Can I have one of those microphones? Thank you. There you go, Rebecca.
I have voter registration forms in the lobby. If you are 16 years old, you can register. You cannot vote until you're 18, but you can be 18 on the day of the election. And if the recent Supreme Court decisions make you feel like you're losing something, register. Get those teenagers in your family or in your neighborhood to register too. These will be on the table right outside to your left. Thank you.
Before we start our reading, I would like to just take a moment to honor those who are not here with us in body, but we know, they're here with us in spirit, especially Anita, who was the hostess of this event for so many years. Whew, I didn't think that was going to happen. So let's just take a moment, please. Thank you so much. So when the framers of the Constitution set out to design our government, it was completely radical. The very idea of democracy had absolutely no precedent in Europe. So they looked to the indigenous people of North America for inspiration. In fact, much of our Constitution was inspired by the self-governing principles of the indigenous people. It is almost as if this land itself held within it the values of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The Declaration of Independence, the bold announcement that we will no longer tolerate governance that is unfair, unjust, was just the first step. It was like the initial clue in a treasure map. In fact, all of what our forefathers and our foremothers who played their roles, all they provided for us was just a map. The treasure is living in a society that truly disperses rights equally to all of its citizens. And as a nation, I feel we are still searching for that pot of gold. I do not think we are there yet. Sometimes I think we take 2 steps forward and then 2 steps back. But it is an ideal that is not only worth reaching and fighting for, but anything short of this dream should not even be acceptable to us. We must keep working toward this end, equality. There are some words and phrases in the Declaration that are jarring to hear today, referring to indigenous people as savages. The stark parallels for today's struggles. But we should not disregard this document. The Declaration of Independence was the first clue in our journey because locked within it is the original passion and commitment for a better way of treating each other as fellow citizens. So I invite you this morning to listen with a keen ear toward that passion and allow it to burn a firecracker in your heart enough to take up the mantle and continue to fight for these sacred ideals. A quick bit of history. The Continental Congress resolved on the 2nd of July, 1776, that these united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states. On the 4th of July, the corrected and approved text of the Declaration of Independence was printed for distribution, and it was read out loud in many communities and in town squares. We start our presentation today with a letter written by John Adams, who was reflecting on the event and tried to sum up what it meant for Americans of his own time and Americans as well in the future.
From a letter by John Adams to Abigail Adams, July 3rd, 1776. This day will be the most memorable epocha in the history of America. I am apt to believe that it will be celebrated by succeeding generations as the great anniversary festival. It ought to be commemorated as the day of deliverance, by solemn acts of devotion to God Almighty. It ought to be solemnized with pomp and parade, with shows, games, sports, guns, bells, bonfires, and illuminations from one end of this continent to the other, from this time forward forevermore. You will think me transported with enthusiasm, but I am not. I am well aware of the toil and blood and treasure that it will cost us to maintain this declaration and support and defend these states. Yet through all the gloom, I could see the rays of ravishing light and glory. I could see that the end is more than worth all the means, and that posterity will triumph in that day's transaction, even although we should rue it, which I trust in God we shall not. In Congress, July 4th, 1776, the unanimous Declaration of the 13 United States of America.
When, in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them. A decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation.
We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed.
That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness.
Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light or transient causes, and accordingly all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty, to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security.
Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world.
He has refused his assent to laws, the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. He has forbidden his governors to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance, unless suspended in their operation till his assent should be obtained. And when so suspended, he has utterly neglected to attend to them. He has refused to pass other laws for the accommodation of large districts of people unless those people would relinquish the right of representation in legislature, a right inestimable to them and formidable to tyrants only.
He has called together legislative bodies at places unusual, uncomfortable, and distant from the depository of their public records, for the sole purpose of fatiguing them into compliance with his measures. He has dissolved representative houses repeatedly for opposing with manly firmness his invasions on the rights of the people.
He has refused for a long time after such dissolutions to cause others to be elected, whereby the legislative powers incapable of annihilation have returned to the people at large for their exercise, the state remaining in them the meantime exposed to all the dangers of invasion from without and convulsions within.
He has endeavored to prevent the population of these states for that purpose obstructing the laws for naturalization of foreigners, refusing to pass others to encourage their migrations hither, and raising conditions of the new appropriations of lands. He has obstructed the administration of justice by refusing his assent to laws for establishing judiciary powers. He has made judges dependent on his will alone for the tenure of their offices. And the amount and payment of their salaries. He has erected a multitude of new offices and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out of their substance.
He has kept among us in times of peace standing armies without consent of our legislatures. He has effected to render the military independent of and superior to the civil power. He has combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution and unacknowledged by our laws, giving his assent to their acts of pretended legislation. For quartering large bodies of armed troops among us, for protecting them by a mock trial from punishment for any murders which they should commit on the inhabitants of these states.
For cutting off our trade with all parts of the world, for imposing taxes on us without our consent, for depriving us in many cases of the benefits of trial by jury, for transporting us beyond seas to be tried for pretended offenses, for abolishing the free system of English laws in a neighboring province, establishing therein an arbitrary government, and enlarging its boundaries so as to render it at once an example and fit instrument for introducing the same absolute rule into these colonies.
For taking away our charters, abolishing our most valuable laws, and altering fundamentally the forms of our governments, for suspending our own legislatures and declaring themselves invested with power to legislate for us in all cases whatsoever. He has abdicated government here by declaring us out of his protection and waging war against us.
He has plundered our seas, ravaged our coasts, burnt our towns, and destroyed the lives of our people. He is at this time transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries to complete the works of death, desolation, and tyranny, already begun with circumstances of cruelty and perfidy scarcely paralleled in the most barbarous ages and totally unworthy the head of a civilized nation. He has constrained our fellow citizens taken captive on the high seas to bear arms against their country, to become the executioners of their friends and brethren, or to fall themselves by their own hands.
He has excited domestic insurrections amongst us and has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers, the merciless Indian savages, whose known rule of warfare is an undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions.
In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be the ruler of free people.
Nor have we been wanting in attentions to our British brethren. We have warned them from time to time of attempts by their legislature to extend an unwarrantable jurisdiction over us. We have reminded them of the circumstances of emigration and settlement here. We've appealed to their native justice and magnanimity, and we have conjured them by the ties of our common kindred to disavow these usurpations, which would inevitably interrupt our connections and correspondence.
They too have been deaf to the voice of justice and of consanguinity. We must therefore acquiesce in the necessity which denounces our separation and hold them as we hold the rest of mankind, enemies in war, in peace, friends.
We, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America, in General Congress assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions do, in the name and by the authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are, and of right, ought to be free and independent states.
That they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved, and that as free and independent states, they have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and to do all other acts and things which independent states may of right do.
And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor.
Button Gwinnett, Georgia.
Lyman Hall, Georgia.
George Walton, Georgia.
William Hooper, North Carolina.
Joseph Hughes, North Carolina.
John Penn, North Carolina.
Edward Rutledge, South Carolina.
Thomas Hayward Jr., South Carolina.
Thomas Lynch Jr., South Carolina.
Arthur Middleton, South Carolina.
John Hancock, Massachusetts.
Samuel Chase, Maryland.
William Packer, Maryland.
Thomas Stone, Maryland.
Charles Carroll of Carrollton, Maryland.
George Wythe, Virginia.
Richard Henry Lee, Virginia.
Thomas Jefferson, Virginia.
Benjamin Harrison, Virginia.
Thomas Nelson Jr., Virginia.
Francis Lightfoot Lee, Virginia.
Carter Braxton, Virginia.
Robert Morris, Pennsylvania.
Benjamin Rush, Pennsylvania.
Benjamin Franklin, Pennsylvania.
John Morton, Pennsylvania.
George Clymer, Pennsylvania.
James Smith, Pennsylvania.
George Taylor, Pennsylvania.
James Wilson, Pennsylvania.
George Ross, Pennsylvania.
Caesar Rodney, Delaware.
George Reed, Delaware.
Thomas McKean, Delaware.
William Floyd, New York.
Philip Livingston, New York.
Francis Lewis, New York.
Lewis Morris, New York.
Richard Stockton, New Jersey.
John Witherspoon, New Jersey.
Francis Hopkinson, New Jersey.
John Hart, New Jersey.
Abraham Clark, New Jersey.
Josiah Bartlett, New Hampshire.
William Whipple, New Hampshire.
Samuel Adams, Massachusetts.
John Adams, Massachusetts.
Robert Treat Payne, Massachusetts.
Elbridge Gerry, Massachusetts.
Stephen Hopkins, Rhode Island.
William Ellery, Rhode Island.
Roger Sherman, Connecticut.
Samuel Huntington, Connecticut.
William Williams, Connecticut.
Oliver Wolcott, Connecticut.
Larry Thornton, New Hampshire.
And this is our Declaration of Independence.
Sorry, Cassie, it was set for me.
As we stood there hungry, I stood there asking, is this land made for you and me? This land is your land, this
Thank you all so much for coming. Happy 4th of July. Free, it's her birthday today. She's going to drum us out. The band is going to play out front for us. I hope you all have a safe rest of your holiday. We have a little something to give to you on the way out. So thank you all so much for coming.